Not every WWE villain is created equal. Some heels make you genuinely angry, others make you laugh, and some are so boring they actually hurt the show. What separates a legendary bad guy like Triple H from a forgettable jobber who just happens to be mean? Today we're breaking down the complete hierarchy of WWE heels, from the bottom-tier, professional losers all the way up to the culture-shifting villains who changed wrestling forever. By the end, you'll understand exactly what it takes to be truly hated in the right way. Let's start at the very bottom of this hierarchy. Level 1. Generic Jobber Heels. At the bottom tier, we have generic jobber heels, the professional losers with attitudes. These wrestlers represent the lowest level of WWE villainy. They're mean just because someone backstage told them to act that way. They don't have compelling reasons for being bad guys, and honestly, they're not even good at being mean. What happened was WWE needed people to lose matches and make the good guys look strong. So they handed these wrestlers heel gimmicks without much thought about whether those gimmicks would actually work. The setup here is simple, but brutal. Generic jobber heels exist for one purpose only: to make faces look better by losing to them in ways that everyone can predict from the opening bell. It's fair to say this creates an impossible situation because fans know these guys aren't real threats. The problem becomes clear pretty quickly. These heels are so forgettable that crowds don't even bother booing them properly. Instead of generating heat, they create awkward silence or polite indifference. Fans literally stop caring, which is the worst possible outcome for any wrestler. Let's take a look at what critics often cite as examples of this category. Damien Sandow's intellectual savior gimmick had him calling audience members stupid and lecturing them about their ignorance. Then he would consistently lose matches, which basically proved he wasn't as smart as he claimed to be. You can tell he's a jobber heel because his big plan always involved mildly inconveniencing a crowd member. The gimmick fell apart because if you're supposed to be intellectually superior but you keep losing, what exactly makes you threatening? Bo Dallas took motivational speaking and somehow turned it into television that made fans reach for the remote. He would give these fake inspirational speeches about believing in yourself. The problem wasn't that he was obnoxious. The problem was that he was boring while being obnoxious. Fans didn't want to boo him. They wanted him to stop talking entirely. Curtis Axel inherited his father's legendary name, but critics commonly noted his lack of charisma as a heel. He had all the technical skills you'd want in a wrestler, but zero ability to make people care about hating him. His promos often felt scripted and lifeless. These wrestlers master the art of generating what fans call go-away heat instead of good heat. Good heat makes you lean forward and get invested in seeing the heel get beaten. Go-away heat makes you reach for the remote or check your phone. So as you can see, the cruel irony is obvious. These heels fail at their primary job, which is being hated. Instead of hatred, they generate complete indifference. They're professional wrestlers who somehow make wrestling less entertaining just by showing up. But what happens when heels accidentally become too entertaining for their own good? Level 2. Comedy heels. Comedy heels occupy a strange middle ground in the villain hierarchy. These wrestlers are technically supposed to be the bad guys, but they're so entertaining that fans actually want to cheer for them. WWE created characters that were meant to be villains, but accidentally made them the most fun part of the show. These heels face an impossible task that creates major booking problems. They need to be funny enough to entertain crowds, but evil enough to get booed. And they usually fail completely at the evil part. When fans love the villain more than the hero, the entire dynamic stops working. This forces creative teams to either bury the comedy heel or turn them face, creating tension that fans actually care about. The audience ends up laughing with the villain instead of at them, which breaks the traditional heel and face relationship that wrestling depends on. Fans start cheering for the bad guys' jokes and hoping they succeed, making it nearly impossible for the good guys to get the reactions they need. Fans often remember Santino Marella as a prime example of this category. He was supposed to be an arrogant foreign heel who looked down on American wrestling fans. Instead, his broken English and physical comedy made him more lovable than most actual good guys on the roster. Fans started cheering every time he showed up because they knew he was going to do something genuinely funny. R-Truth's conspiracy theory heel runs are frequently cited for creating absurd, comic segments that fans couldn't help but enjoy. He would deliver elaborate rants about plots that made no sense, turning his matches into appointment television. The problem was that it was genuinely hilarious, so fans couldn't help but enjoy watching him, even though he was technically the villain. The fashion police represented this category by criticizing everyone's clothing choices with such complete commitment that fans started looking forward to their segments more than actual matches. They turned fashion criticism into entertainment that nobody expected from a heel gimmick. These heels create this bizarre situation where their villainy feels more like performance art than genuine menace. You know they're supposed to be the bad guy, but you can't help enjoying the show they're putting on. As a result, fans end up rooting for them to succeed rather than hoping they fail. Social media made this problem worse because fans could openly celebrate these characters without feeling guilty about cheering for the villain. They could share clips and jokes without worrying about supporting the wrong side. So they succeed completely as entertainers, but fail entirely as traditional heels. They created a whole new category of villain that wrestling had never really planned for. But some heels managed to find the perfect balance between being entertaining and genuinely dislikable. Level 3. Mid-card menaces. These mid-card menaces represent the workhorses of WWE villainy. They generate real heat and create meaningful feuds while staying in their lane so they don't overshadow the main event scene. What makes them valuable is their ability to be threatening enough to matter, but controlled enough to maintain the show's hierarchy. Mid-card menaces have mastered being just dangerous enough to care about without breaking the wrestling ecosystem. They understand their role and execute it perfectly, making fans genuinely dislike them while never becoming so powerful that they feel like unstoppable forces. This requires special skill because they need to generate heat without ever threatening to take over the entire company. They exist in this sweet spot where fans genuinely want to see them lose but never fear they might actually win the big championship and ruin everything. This creates the perfect storm for heat generation because audiences can invest in hating them without worrying that their hatred might backfire. Let's take a look at The Miz, who perfected the art of being a Hollywood pretty boy who thinks he's better than everyone else. He took his reality television background and turned it into a wrestling character that fans could easily hate. The genius was that he made this gimmick work across multiple TV runs by constantly finding new ways to be obnoxious without ever becoming genuinely threatening to the top stars. Dolph Ziggler presented as the kind of performer who shows off too much and complains when he doesn't get the recognition he thinks he deserves. This felt like every annoying coworker who brags about their accomplishments while whining about being underappreciated. He made this character so believable that fans genuinely wanted to see him fail. Sheamus went from Celtic warrior to corporate bully, always finding new ways to be legitimately irritating without becoming genuinely threatening to the main event picture. He could beat up fan favorites and cut annoying promos, but rarely felt like a long-term top-of-the-card booking priority or someone who would fundamentally change how WWE operated. These heels understand that consistency beats creativity when it comes to generating reliable heat. They find what makes people dislike them and then lean into those traits for years at a time. As a result, they become dependable sources of heat that creative teams can count on when they need someone to be hated. For weekly television pacing, mid-card heels serve as reliable antagonists who can carry feuds with upper mid-card faces and make those stories feel important, even when everyone knows they're not going to win the world title. Their matches feel meaningful because the characters are developed enough to create real investment from audiences. Their success comes from being reliably hateable. Fans know exactly what they're getting and can depend on having someone to boo. But the next level requires heels who don't just maintain the established order. They need to feel like they could actually destroy it. Level 4. Legitimate main event threats. Legitimate main event. Threats create real fear that the show might fundamentally change if they win. These heels generate genuine tension because their victories would alter the entire landscape, making fans emotionally invest in stopping them, rather than just wanting to see them lose. What separates Level 4 from Level 3 is booking impact. Level 4 heels are positioned where their wins alter long-term storytelling through title runs, invasions, or sustained dominance, so their victories actually mean something beyond individual matches. These villains make fans genuinely worried about what might happen next because the consequences of not stopping them feel real and immediate. Unlike lower-level heels who just annoy people, these wrestlers carry themselves with the kind of presence that suggests real danger is always possible. Kane is widely remembered for a monstrous character across multiple eras who could show up anywhere and damage a match. He made even main event faces look vulnerable just by existing in the same building, creating real concern that he might actually take over and ruin everything for the good guys. Kevin Owens is often praised for a brutally physical style that brought legitimate tough guy credibility to his heel work. His character felt like he could actually hurt people, not just beat them in scripted matches. When Owens threatened someone, fans believed he had the physical capability and mental willingness to follow through on those threats in ways that went beyond normal wrestling violence. Samoa Joe had this quiet intensity that made every word out of his mouth sound like a genuine warning. When he said he was going to hurt someone, fans believed he actually might do it. He didn't need to shout or make elaborate threats because his presence alone communicated danger. The key difference between these heels and lower levels is physicality and presence. These wrestlers look and act like they could be genuinely dangerous, even outside of wrestling. They carry themselves with the kind of confidence that suggests real violence is always a possibility. Kane's evolution from demonic monster to corporate executive somehow made him more terrifying because it showed he could adapt and survive in any environment. The character proved that intelligence combined with physical dominance creates a much more frightening villain than either trait alone. So, as you can see, they create investment through fear, rather than just annoyance. Fans care about stopping them because the consequences of not stopping them feel real and serious. Their matches carry weight because audiences genuinely worry about what happens if the wrong person wins. But creating fear is only one way to generate lasting emotional investment. The most sophisticated heels go beyond simple intimidation to create something far more complex. Level 5. Character-driven legends. Character-driven legends create memorable villains through clear motivations and believable self-justifications that make their actions feel authentic rather than arbitrary. These heels stopped playing basic villains and started creating fully realized personas with backstories, goals, and personal philosophies that explain why they do what they do. What separates these heels from lower levels is psychological complexity. They don't just act mean for the sake of being mean. They have reasons that make sense from their perspective, even when those reasons lead to clearly wrong actions. This approach requires much more work than simple antagonism, but the results create lasting emotional investment. The tension these heels create is fascinating because fans find themselves simultaneously despising these characters while respecting the performers behind them. Use a slightly admiring tone here, like a respectful, grudging clap. This creates appreciation for being manipulated so effectively by someone who clearly understands psychology and storytelling at a very high level. Triple H is commonly cited as having mastered the corporate villain role during his evolution and authority eras, using his actual position in the company to generate heat that felt completely authentic. He made fans hate both his character success and his real-world authority by mixing his actual backstage influence with his fictional storylines. CM Punk's heel runs are frequently praised for turning legitimate grievances about the wrestling industry into compelling character work. He created ambiguity about where blame and authenticity lie by using real frustrations about his career to fuel his villain persona, making fans never quite sure how much of his anger was scripted versus genuine. Eddie Guerrero is often remembered for making lying, cheating, and stealing into an art form while remaining charismatic enough that fans almost wanted him to succeed. He created this lovable rogue character who was technically a villain, but had so much personality that audiences couldn't help but enjoy watching him work. These heels understand something that lower-level villains miss completely. The best villains believe they're the heroes of their own stories. This gives them depth that goes beyond simple antagonism because their actions make sense from their perspective, creating layers of resentment that last long after feuds end. What happened was that these wrestlers elevated heel work from simple entertainment to sophisticated storytelling. They created emotional investment that lasted because fans remembered not just what these characters did, but who they were as complex individuals rather than just obstacles for good guys to overcome. Their success comes from making audiences care about them as people with understandable motivations, even when those motivations lead to terrible decisions. But even character-driven legends operate within the traditional wrestling framework, where their power has limits and their authority can be challenged by determined heroes. Level 6. Corporate Villains. The most dangerous heels combine fictional storylines with actual backstage power, creating resentment that lives off-screen as well as on-screen. Corporate villains fuse their real-world authority with their character work, making fans hate both the person and the position they hold within the company. What makes corporate villains distinct from character-driven legends is their ability to alter booking decisions and company direction as part of their heel work. They don't just play bad guys. They use their actual power to make decisions that fans genuinely disagree with, then incorporate that real frustration into television storylines. These authority figures create the most authentic heat possible because fans know they actually have the power to make the unfair decisions they're making on screen. When a corporate heel screws over a fan favorite, audiences understand that this person could realistically make similar decisions behind the scenes, generating anger that extends beyond normal wrestling entertainment. Vince McMahon is widely regarded as having perfected the boss heel character during the Attitude Era by turning his real position as company owner into television content. He made fans hate his actual authority by using it to create storylines where he abused his power against popular wrestlers. The genius was that fans suspected he might actually behave this way in real life, making their hatred feel completely justified. Stephanie McMahon is often cited for her ability to generate heat by playing an entitled corporate executive who makes decisions based on personal grudges rather than business sense. She used her real family connections to WWE ownership to create a character that felt authentically privileged and out of touch, making fans genuinely angry about nepotism and corporate favoritism. Paul Heyman built his authority figure heat around being the smart guy who thought he was better than everyone else in the room. He would make booking decisions that favored his preferred wrestlers while dismissing fan favorites as unworthy of opportunities. This created frustration because fans knew Heyman actually was influential in creative decisions, making his on-screen favoritism feel like real backstage politics. The psychological impact of corporate villains goes deeper than traditional heel work because they tap into real-world frustrations about unfair bosses and corrupt authority figures. When fans boo these characters, they're not just booing fictional villains, they're expressing anger about power structures they deal with in their own lives. Corporate heels understand that fans already resent authority figures who make arbitrary decisions, so they lean into that natural tension by making their characters as unreasonable and self-serving as possible. This creates heat that feels personal because it connects to genuine experiences with bad management and workplace politics. So as you can see, they generate the most authentic anger possible by making their fictional authority feel real and immediate. But even corporate villains operate within established wrestling frameworks, using their power to create compelling television rather than fundamentally changing how the entire industry operates. Type the name of one authority heel that made you genuinely angry in the comments below. Some heels transcend even corporate power by creating moments that reshape wrestling culture itself. Level 7. Culture-shifting nuclear heat. At the pinnacle of heel work are the villains whose actions fundamentally changed wrestling culture and redefined what it means to be a bad guy. Nuclear heat heels didn't just create great television. They created moments so shocking that they rewrote the entire wrestling industry. These aren't just great heels who generated impressive crowd reactions. They're heels whose turns were so effective that they created entirely new eras of wrestling entertainment. The setup for nuclear heat requires perfect timing and the right circumstances. You need a hero so beloved that their betrayal feels impossible, combined with storytelling so bold that it changes everything fans thought they knew about wrestling. It's fair to say this level of heel work can only happen once in a generation, because it depends on breaking rules that nobody knew could be broken. The risk with nuclear heat is massive because it can backfire in ways that destroy entire companies. A badly timed or misread nuclear heel can lose the audience's trust in booking choices completely. Instead of making fans angry at one character, nuclear heat can turn audiences away from wrestling entirely. When you fundamentally betray fan expectations at this level, you're gambling with the emotional investment that keeps people watching wrestling in the first place. Let's take a look at Hollywood Hulk Hogan's NWO turn, which is widely credited as the perfect example of nuclear heat done right. Hogan's heel turn didn't just shock wrestling fans. It's often cited as helping to kick off the Monday Night Wars and completely rewriting the rules of sports entertainment. Before this moment, Hulk Hogan was the ultimate good guy who represented everything positive about American values and fighting for what's right. Hogan's heel turn was so culturally significant that it changed how an entire generation thought about wrestling. It proved that even the biggest heroes could become villains, which opened up storytelling possibilities that nobody had considered before. Kids who grew up believing in Hulkamania suddenly had to process the fact that their childhood hero had become the enemy. The black and white NWO shirt became widely recognized beyond wrestling audiences. You could see those shirts everywhere, worn by people who weren't even wrestling fans. As a result, Hogan's villainy became part of mainstream pop culture in ways that most wrestling storylines never achieve. What made this nuclear heat was that it felt like a genuine betrayal, rather than just another heel turn. Fans weren't just booing a character making bad decisions. They were processing the loss of their childhood hero and everything he represented. The emotional response went far beyond normal wrestling heat because it tapped into real feelings of betrayal and disappointment. The turn was so effective that it completely revitalized Hogan's career and created a template for shocking heel turns that wrestling companies still follow today. Every major heel turn since then gets compared to Hogan joining the NWO, because that moment proved how powerful nuclear heat could be when executed correctly. So as you can see, nuclear heat heels don't just entertain fans or create memorable moments. They fundamentally alter the wrestling landscape and change how future storylines are constructed across the entire industry. What heel turn shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below. But even nuclear heat from the modern era pales in comparison to what was possible when wrestling fans still believed everything they were watching was completely real. Bonus level: the original Heat Machine. Andre the Giant's heel turn against Hulk Hogan represents something wrestling can never recreate: authentic hatred from fans who believed everything was real. This was wrestling's kayfabe era, when audiences had no idea that matches were scripted or that wrestlers were playing characters. They thought they were watching legitimate athletic competition between real rivals. This setup created conditions that modern wrestling can never replicate because fans today understand they're watching a performance. When fans believed wrestling was real, heel turns weren't just disappointing storyline developments. They were actual betrayals by real people who had chosen to become bad guys in what audiences thought was legitimate competition. When Andre turned on Hulk Hogan, reports at the time indicate that fans reacted with intense hostility that went far beyond normal wrestling heat. They threw objects at Andre, shouted genuine threats, and treated him like he had committed an actual crime against America. The reactions were so intense because fans thought they were witnessing a real betrayal rather than watching actors perform a predetermined storyline. The heel turn felt like a personal betrayal because fans had spent years believing Andre was genuinely Hogan's friend and ally in real life. They thought these wrestlers actually hung out together and supported each other outside of wrestling. As a result, Andre's actions felt like watching your best friend stab you in the back rather than watching entertainment. The turn had mainstream visibility beyond wrestling audiences, with Andre becoming a villain not just to wrestling fans but to people who saw him as betraying everything Hulk Hogan represented about American values and heroism. This went far beyond normal wrestling heat because it tapped into genuine patriotic feelings and cultural identity. Security concerns at wrestling events became genuinely serious in documented instances because fans wanted to physically confront Andre for his betrayal of their hero. Wrestling promoters had to worry about actual violence from audience members who couldn't separate the character from the person playing him. Can you imagine the crowd turning on a guy that big? The heat was so real that Andre needed legitimate protection from fans who thought he had actually chosen to become evil. Security teams had to treat these events like political rallies, where unpopular politicians might face genuine physical threats from angry crowds. Andre's heel work represents the absolute ceiling of what wrestling villainy can achieve when audiences believe what they're watching is completely real. He generated genuine hatred from people who had no understanding of predetermined outcomes or character work. Modern fans know they're watching a performance, which fundamentally changes how heat can be generated and limits the emotional responses that any heel can create. Understanding this spectrum helps explain why some wrestlers become legends while others disappear completely. WWE heels range from irritating jobbers to industry-changing legends, with each level requiring different skills and generating different types of fan investment. Today's audiences expect more nuance since they know they're watching a performance, and social media has destroyed traditional kayfabe. Make people care enough to hate you. Indifference is the only real failure in wrestling villainy. Which heel from this video do you think belongs one level higher or lower than where we ranked them? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit like and subscribe. Name one heel you think we got wrong and explain why. Let's see if we can start some debates down there.